everyone. Welcome to a school climate transformation grant conversation that we're going to have. This is intended for the SEAs who have received the school climate transformation grant, or it could also be for other SEAs that are interested in applying for an SEA grant if that opportunity becomes available in the future. We've also got folks who have received this school climate transformation grant that we're planning to be on this meeting today, who are willing to share and even learn from others, because as we have learned, this statewide implementation is an ongoing process long after our grants end. So before I go ahead and get started, just as a reminder, the purpose of these conversations are open to all school climate transformation grantees, but they're also open to other folks too that may have thought this would be an interesting discussion. But we would hope that a lot of the folks who are the school climate transformation grantees would take this opportunity to be able to ask questions specifically around your implementation as it's related to your grant goals. But this is also an opportunity to connect with other folks across the country that also have these grants. And this topic came up because you guys had completed a survey and had let us know that this was one of the areas of interest. So I'm hoping that we'll use this information, that you'll take advantage of it to post questions that you have. I'll be trying to pay attention to the questions that are coming in the chat box, as well as the discussion. We don't have a whole lot of people signed up for the live event. So the good news with that is that for those of you that are on, it will give you an opportunity to be able to unmute yourself. So when you do want to, we'll go through what the norms would be for that. But you will probably be able to talk and not have to type every single thing out. Just as an actual disclaimer, as we usually do for all of our stuff, is that the content for this presentation is supported from the funds from not only the Center on PBIS, but as well as our funding that we have from OESE as well. So we're looking at this. I would not treat this as a typical webinar per se. The description of today was to talk about and learn from other grantees how they've developed their statewide model of implementation. But for you guys to have that opportunity to discuss your lessons learned to date, and hopefully we can engage in some deeper conversation around all of this. So the norms, how we're going to make this work. Like I said, it's not a traditional webinar today. We're calling these conversations. So if you happen to be an LEA that had registered, I did see that there were a handful of LEAs that had registered. You're still welcome to stay on. But just know that this is going to be specifically geared towards state level implementation for the state leaders. So a big thing to keep in mind, because I'm not fluent on everybody's name from across the states, is that when you do type something into the chat box, if you could please state just the abbreviation for your state that you're representing. Just know that this will be recorded, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be posted on PBIS.org or that all of it would be posted. When it gets to the true opportunity to open up and have that conversation, it's quite possible that we may end up only posting the beginning portion online. But we've lucked out sometimes for those of you who have participated in these conversations before. The content's been so rich, and everybody's like, I'm fine having that posted up on the national site. So again, just know that we are recording it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it will get posted. The good news is, because we'll need for you, I've got Austin working with me. He's based in Oregon. I'm based in Tampa. And the good news is that you raise your hand, you want microphone access. However, if you do not want your portion to be recorded at that time, that's perfectly fine. Just state it or put it in the chat box, and he's going to be paying attention to that and making sure that the recording is paused during that time. I was not planning to do any breakouts today or polls based upon the number of folks that we had registered for the live event. But just as a quick reminder for you, the purpose of the School Climate Transformation Grant It was competitive. You guys should be really proud of yourselves. I know you got funded in 2018. It's been a lot of work, and then it's been even more work trying to figure out how do we spend our money during a pandemic, and everybody's been dealing with that. It's also forced us to get creative in how we're providing and having to readjust and reboot some of the activities that we had originally planned to do in light of the pandemic. But the goal is for you guys to develop and enhance and expand your systems of support so that your districts and schools actually can start to implement that multi-tiered behavioral framework, because we want everybody to be able to succeed out there. So this was a very, very cool grant, and congratulations for you guys for getting those grants. So as a quick overview, just as a reminder, because I know that there's been some new project directors, some new folks from our state teams and LEAs who've come on and may not know the background or the understanding or where they fit in the bigger picture of school climate transformation. So in 2014, that was the first time that the Office of Safe and Supportive Schools had offered the school climate transformation. There were 12 SEAs that had gotten the grant, 71 LEAs, and that was a total of 142 districts across the board, over 2,400 schools. In 2018, there were 14 SEAs that had reapplied. Of those 14 SEAs, I believe 4 of them were and don't quote me on this, but I believe it was 4 that were also 2014 awardees. They had reapplied in 2018. 2019, then 69 LEAs were then funded the School Climate Transformation Grant. So the stars across the map here show all of the folks we'd reached out to you individually, hoping that you could attend this and hoping to build your networking. But knowing that because you have a star and you have the SCA School Climate Transformation Grant, you may have an LEA that also received the School Climate Transformation Grant. You may not. But you also may have a tremendous amount of work that's been occurring within your state already. And this was a great opportunity to boost what you were already doing around that multi-tiered behavior framework. Just to give you a little background, like I said, I'm Heather George. I co-direct and co-PI co-director of the National Center on PBIS. I've been with the center since 2001. That was our very first round of funding. So celebrating my 21st year, but we have just started our 24th year of continuous funding from the Department of Ed. And over these 20 plus years, we have needed, OSIP has asked us to at times have to expand our foci into different areas, because we're seeing, we look at opioid, kids are coming to school with either drug addictions or coming from homes with some drug substance abuse occurring. And that does impact the classroom. And so all of these different areas impact our classroom, and trying to figure out, it doesn't mean we have to become experts in all of these different areas, but we've got to be really smart about how we're setting up this multi-tiered approach to improve the capacity of the SEAs. And our goal is to help you set up that approach, help you organize your supports into figuring out how to roll this out and scale it out across your state, and really, truly support and promote and practice a continuum of supports. So again, it's never a dull moment, I could say, and you guys are experiencing that out in the field. One of the other things, just to give you a heads up, is you guys know, but as a reminder, that PBIS does work when it is implemented with Fidelity. And so it's not just a matter of a spray and pray training approach. It's something that's going to require some work, going to require some commitment, and which brings in a whole slew of different dynamics, such as marketing and public relations and building buy-in across the board. But I think it's important for you guys to know that if you're trying to get a multi-tiered behavioral framework, whether it's PBIS or you're calling it, MTSS, and it's the behavior side of it, the issue is we do have research, statistically significant outcomes when folks implement PBIS with Fidelity, from reducing unwanted behavior, increasing pro-social behavior, improved emotional regulation, improved academic achievement, improved perceptions in school safety, improved organizational health. But we're also seeing significant, when we focus just on that high school level, we're seeing specific, if you implement with Fidelity, we're seeing that reduced unwanted behavior. That's great. But we're also seeing reduced alcohol and other drug use, improved attendance, improved student engagement. So the part that's important for you guys to understand is that you may not have written your grant for the school climate transformation, but it's been put in your lap and you're in charge of implementing it. What's important to know is that when you are implementing the PBIS framework, we do see these results across all the grade levels. But it's going to take work in trying to get all of the different players across our states to get on board and to make sure that we are implementing with Fidelity. So what do we do in this process? And again, I'm just giving you just some quick background before we turn it over to the specific conversations. So these guiding principles, we've got to get back to our basics, do what works and do it well. And I think the beauty of having a grant is that you guys do have set deliverables. You have approved goals, and it does allow you to focus specifically just on that. So hopefully you didn't write way too many goals, and it's getting confusing and trying to figure out who's doing what and when to implement them. But just remember, do what works and do it well. So we're going to be using those evidence-based practices. Leverage your existing systems. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, because some of you, when you got the school climate transformation grant, you may have already been working, or you might have been working already on a statewide implementation project. It's possible that the school climate transformation grant allows you to have some type of state level impact and you didn't have a project before in your state. It's quite possible that you have the grant and you're not working directly with a state implementation project. So we've got to think about it. And all of those are okay. There's not one right way. What's important is just to think about, okay, you've got your approved goals. What other resources do we have within our state? And what do we need to do to leverage our existing systems? Because our states are big. Even the folks in Vermont and Rhode Island, they're saying, hey, there's still driving time. There's still a lot of players out there. We've got to think about, there's other folks out there. How do we make sure that we're building our partnerships, building the training? We're not duplicating our efforts. And how can we actually help to propel the work that we're doing to have the impact? Because most folks are on that same trajectory that they want to be able to improve the environment, because the goal is to have improved student outcomes. And we want the adults that are actually working at the schools to enjoy their jobs as well. Those guiding principles, using data to drive the decisions. So it's not just a quick, this sounds like a great idea, let's fully go with it. Let's screen for elevated risk. Let's find out who needs the more intensive supports. Let's monitor our data. Let's monitor if we're implementing with Fidelity, and let's make adjustments throughout the year. How about throughout the month? And review our data and engage in that progress monitoring. But then knowing that using that multi-tiered framework or using the PBIS framework, it's going to help us organize our needs, going to help us organize the supports we're providing to the students, to the families, and all of the adults that we have in that school building that are supporting the students across that full continuum of supports, meaning everybody, and then those needing more additional supports at a targeted level or receiving the more intensified minutes, and then those that need the most intensive minutes are receiving that as well. So that implementation cascade for you guys coming into that state, from that state lens, is to always think like, okay, everything that you're doing at that state level, we want to be able to impact the districts or the LEAs across our state. And the goal is to build their capacity so that they can best impact and have the tools to best support all of their schools across their district, in hopes to get into that classroom, get the classroom practices up and rolling, support those teachers, and best so we can have the most impact on that student And the goal is to have a positive impact on that individual student. So thinking about constantly what you're doing, what does this have as an impact overall on your state? But that implementation cascade, it's somewhat of an onion. That next layer is that direct contact with that district and building that local capacity, and not only the state coming to that district and coming in to support schools as well, but also that bi-directional communication that we're also learning from them. They're in the field, they're helping to self-check and say, hey, what you guys talked about or this timeline that you came up with, we need to have some adjustments here. And so again, looking at each other as this community of practice and learning from each other in this process. So leveraging these existing systems, as a national center, we're providing TA to the states. The states in turn are turning around the TA to the LEAs, in turn, LEAs to their schools and community, and it trickles on down to the classrooms and the classrooms to the students and their families. All of this, though, is built around this notion of building capacity. We don't want to be in that expert model. We want to be able to be working with each other and knowing that regardless of where you're coming from, if you're that individual teacher, or let me start at the state. If you're looking at that state level, thinking about your state level teaming and figuring out who do we need to get on board for our stakeholders or the folks that are going to be helping us propel this across the state. What types of funding or how does this align with other things that are happening in the state? Well, how might this impact policy? Do we need to look at things of how we can better support policy? And what do we need to do to build our workforce across our state? All of this then leads into the specific actions or those implementation functions of what's involved with who needs to be trained, what are we training on, what are we then providing support so that folks are able to implement the new skills that they learned in that training, and that's that coaching piece. But then how are we using our data to determine, was it working? What do we need to do for adjustments? All of that in hopes of building these local implementation demonstrations. So for some of you, if you're you're on a school climate transformation grant, you've got your SCA, it's like, well, I'm just doing my goals. The thing is, the goals, we would hope that they are still embedded in establishing that team at that district level, establishing that team at that school level, so that what you are bringing in, whether it's additional training, additional supports, any other types of resources, it has the best likelihood of being able to sustain long after the life of the grant and actually make a difference within those classrooms. So some of the things we learned from the 2014 school climate sites, if you click on this document, you click on any of the other documents, which I will upload into the chat box as soon as I turn it over to you guys to talk so that you can download it. There's 10 lessons learned that from the LEA and the SCAs from the 2014 sites. The reason I'm putting this up there is because it might be something where you go, we're already starting to learn that too. So big thing, focusing on outcomes, clearly defining the work, needing to establish a leadership team, aligning the school climate transformation with key initiatives that are happening either within your state or within the districts, specifying those data systems, providing that differentiated district supports. Not all districts are going to need the same level of support from the state, but figuring out what it is that they need and being able to provide it accordingly. Developing the training, coaching, and technical expertise across the state or the district. Engaging in meaningful evaluation activities. We don't want folks to be compliance driven. We actually want them to understand that data can help make a difference and can be lead to the results we're hoping to achieve. Build that capacity across that implementation cascade, which we talked about, the state, district, school, classroom, individual student, but also invest in that local implementation capacity. We want to be able to create more folks like us at that state level, but out across the state. Doesn't mean they're state employees, but it means we need to be able to build the skills of folks and help provide a system to help organize those skills and what they're doing so that we can have essentially work smarter out there across the field. So to give you I'll go first as the first state to just share quickly. The Florida Department of Education, I'm based at USF. We had written the grant for the Florida Department of Ed, and we received the School Climate Transformation Grant in 2014. The purpose of our grant that we had applied for and the goals that we were based around was specifically to boost what we were doing already with our state project. We have a pretty well-established state project, the Florida PBIS project. It's based at USF, but we are in almost every single LEA across the state. So right now, we've got over 2,100 schools that have been trained. 49% of those trained have received ongoing Tier 1 training just even in the past 3 years. But some of the highlights that we took from the funding that allowed us to do is, yes, we had a statewide system, but we took that funding and said, you know what, we actually want to dive deeper, and we need to spend more time in developing our area around early childhood, around developing our resources and process around coaching, around how we're supporting classrooms within the state, how we're addressing equity across the state, as well as how we're addressing advanced tiers beyond just staying at that Tier 1, but how are we truly engaging and addressing the advanced tiers across the state? So we had allowed us to expand what we were doing on our statewide project and really focus a lot of our time and energy around those 6 main areas. This one page here is just a snapshot of what we did across the 7 years. It was a 5-year grant, but then the pandemic hit. We got a 1-year no-cost extension. Or maybe we got a no-cost extension and then the pandemic hit during that no-cost extension. So we were able to apply again because we weren't able to spend down all of our money. We weren't traveling anywhere. And it ended up being a 7th year. That is extremely unusual. So just know that that's one of the strange things about it. But we were happy to continue that going. But the thing to take away is that 91% of our LEAs now in Florida are actively engaged with the Florida PBIS project. And I completely also attribute the School Climate Transformation Grant for allowing that, because it allowed us to bring on more personnel, but it allowed us to move into other areas that our state grant that did not have those deliverables. And so it allowed us to be able to do this and to work with folks in deeper implementation. Of those 91% of LEAs, so we only have about 6 LEAs that have not worked with us at all. If they're actively engaged, it means you have an active district leadership team that we are meeting with at least yearly on this. Of those LEAs, those 91%, 69% of them have over 70% of their schools trained in actively implementing PBIS. So to me, I feel like we're grateful for the School Climate Transformation Grant, but what worked, that helped boost our stuff. What didn't work in this process is that now that the funding is gone, our state level folks are like, hey, but we liked all that stuff that you were doing for the last 7 years. We ended up losing some folks because we couldn't keep them on. Our state funds did not help to supplement that money that we had no longer received for the School Climate Transformation Grant. But districts really liked how we were able to expand the amount of content areas. And so because it was our same folks, it worked out really nicely. We didn't have to train new folks. Our Florida PBIS folks were also our School Climate Transformation folks. So they already knew all of the tools that we had developed around coaching and equity and advanced tiers, for example. The problem is now so many more people wanted it, and we didn't necessarily have the capacity for it. So I would say that it was a little bit of a challenge for us in that how do you help the main gravy train that we had in Florida understand that, hey, we would love to continue doing all of this work but we were only able to boost it and propel it because we had this extra funding and we're allowed to bring on extra people during this time. So Rosemary asked if you could share the infographic. If you click directly on the link click on that annual report, it'll take you straight to those infographics on there. And all of this is contained in our Florida report. And I just want to talk briefly about Florida to just share as a conversation kind of what we have done for, we were established as a statewide project. We used the school climate transformation funds to boost what we were doing and expand what we were unable to do with our state funds. And now trying to continue to sustain after the ending of funding. So where can you find all of this information? All of it is located on the national site, pbis.org. We are here to help support you guys. And, please reach out. If you go to that school climate transformation drop-down menu for topics, but there's also an area on there for district and state PBIS. If you're not sure who your PBIS state coordinator is, you can go to the website under About and scroll down, and you can be able to reach out directly to that person. But there's also a center partner who is also tagged with your state, and you could reach out with them and they can help to connect. I know a lot of it, you guys are like, yep, that's me already. But for some of you, you may not know that or may not have an established relationship. We're happy to help build those relationships. So one of the things, just to give you guys a heads up, our PBIS Leadership Forum, we had over 2,300 people this past year. It was virtual. And this year it's going to be in Chicago at the end of October. Registration is opening up on May 1st. This is completely supported by the National Center on PBIS. There's an awful lot of exemplars who are school climate transformation recipients that are selected to present and to showcase what they have done out there. But if you did not get a chance to participate in the virtual event last year, just know that all of the recordings from that have been moved over to the national site, and they're all available up there for free viewing. But space is going to be limited. We only have about 1,700 people that we can fill the rooms with. And so just know that when it opens up on May 1st, if you're interested in going to downtown Chicago in October, you'll want to pay attention to that. All right, so now I'm officially done with the intro, the background, and talking about it. And I wanted to turn this over to you guys. I can't see everybody who's in here right now. Let me try. Oh, there you are. Oh, it's so great. We've got so many folks here. We see Rhode Island and Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Georgia, Hawaii. I want you guys to know Gordon is on right now from Hawaii, and it is about 6:30 in the morning his time. So good work on that, Gordon. So here were some of the things that I wanted to talk to you guys about. What are some of your approved school climate transformation activities? Because not everybody had written necessarily the same goals, but you all got funded. But we all know that it had to do something related to that multi-tiered behavioral framework. And the question is, thinking about if you want to give folks kind of some background information, do you have a statewide implementation project? So you heard the example from Florida. Some of you have heard a lot about Michigan. They did have a Michigan MTSS, formerly known as MyBlissy. And then they had also gotten the School Climate Transformation Grant. Some of you may have also gotten a Project Aware as well. But I think it would be important to know, let folks know, do you work collaboratively with the other state project if one does exist? Or what would you say your statewide model of implementation looks like? After talking about background, I think it'd be good for us to get into talking about lessons learned, like what's worked, what hasn't worked. If you could do it over, what would you do differently? I could do it over. And if I was able to do this, I would probably hope to apply for it without having to go through our Department of Education, because the only way our Department of Education was able to get the funding out to us is I had to reapply for the grant that I wrote for the Florida Department of Ed. So again, that was the only way. So it seemed somewhat kind of strange. And then we'd have to report data there and then report data to the feds. So it was a lot of a duplicative process. But that's what we got to do for the extra funding. So if you would like to jump in and share and give some folks some background and share what's worked, if you could maybe raise your hand, and Austin can give you microphone rights. If you'd like your video on, that's completely up to you. If you would like him to pause the recording while you're talking, that's perfectly fine too. Gordon, all right. Good morning.
Good morning. I don't care if you turn my video on. I don't know if anybody's interested in seeing my mug though, but thanks for inviting me, Heather. We were a part of the first cohort in 2014, and the world has changed quite a bit, and education has changed quite a bit since that time. And when we were writing the grant proposal in 2013, 2014, we were still talking about RTIB. So that's how far we've come since that time. The reason I'm sharing first is because I got to get on the road to go into the office. So I wanted to say my piece before I moved over to my phone. But I think the main lesson that I would encourage you to think about when you're implementing your grants is to think long term, to think about sustainability and what can you do to increase the capacity long term for your state to be able to implement multitude behavioral framework. And we went through so many changes during our term with the grant. And we had a 6-year, we took the no cost extension for a year. Heather, I don't know how you managed to get a 7th year, but we ended up in September of 2020. And in that time, education kind of went through a transformation where the fields started moving from PBIS to MTSS. And so our department did as well. In the middle of the grant, our superintendent changed. That posed some challenges. But the good thing about it is we were kind of protected with the grant because we had goals that we had to fulfill, obligations to the federal government. So they couldn't do too much to interrupt the things we were doing. But so basically what we did was, and I don't know if the grant is structured the same way now, but we had three what you guys would call districts that we were working with as a part of the grant, and they got funding as well. And we used those 3 complex areas as kind of laboratories, but with the idea that the ultimate goal of the grant was to increase capacity statewide. And so the complex area folks did a great job. We were so fortunate to have such a good team that at the end of the funding, all of our directors were picked up by their what we call complex areas. We're one school district in Hawaii, which poses some unique challenges and has some pluses as well. But all 3 of the complex areas directors were picked up by their complex areas to continue working and actually expanding your work from PBIS to MTSS. And so what we really wanted to do was show outcomes within those complex areas kind of as a evidence of proof of our concept. And so we worked very closely with them, and the data collection with them was important as well. One of the great things about PBIS is the support you can get externally, and a lot of it being free through PBIS.org and PBIS apps. And we kind of leverage that. And so we use the tiered Fidelity inventory as a measure of progress. The PBIS implementation wasn't required, but using the TFI allowed the schools in the complex areas to collect data in such a way that we didn't have to set up a data system in order to collect data that would show progress of PBIS being adopted by schools in the state. And so, and I don't want to be too long-winded, but so that was really helpful in showing, as the research did, that there are positive student outcomes that we gain because of the implementation of PBIS. And I think I'll stop there. If you guys have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Gordon. This is Heather. Quick question for you. If you, since your funding has ended, you were a 2014 awardee. I'm curious if you could do it over. What do you think you would do differently, since the folks right now are still funded and still implementing their grant?
Yeah, I think we kind of we took advantage of, we had really good staff, and so personnel was important. So I wouldn't necessarily change that. But what we would have done differently probably is engage with the executive leadership more. One of the things that has been a struggle and has been to get buy-in from executive leadership and to make putting in these systems a priority. I'm happy to announce though that as of a year ago, they did adopt making MTSS mandatory across the state. So every school has to have some kind of multi-tiered system in place. And I credit that in large part to the work we did with PBIS. And so I think the main thing is to engage with executive leadership, let them know what you're doing, let them know the good work, show your work, show your outcomes, and that it does make a difference. We shared with them the research piece and all of that. And so I think that was really helpful in moving our state forward. And we specifically chose not to reapply for a school climate transformation grant this time because we felt like we were on firm enough footing where we could go forth. And the next step was to kind of just increase the amount of, not to change practices, but to increase the amount of schools that are actually using PBIS apps and everyone. Yeah.
That was awesome, Gordon. Thank you. If there are other questions for Gordon, please, I think it's probably faster to put them in the chat box. And then if somebody else has another thing that they would like to talk about their state and share, that would be fantastic. Gordon, I thought you brought up a good point about you guys specifically chose not to reapply for the 2018 round. And Florida was the same way too. We purposely chose not to, only because we were having trouble spending down our money from 2014. And we thought, how can we justify asking for more money? What I didn't know is that you could put in your budget the first 2 years, ask for no dollars, and it would kick in 3 years. But again, lesson learned. So. All right. So, Gordon, if you are able to stay on, again, if anybody has questions, comments for Gordon, please put them in the chat box. So, Rosemary, so the Rhode Island, there's a lot of folks from Rhode Island. For a small state, you guys are mighty. And
we sure are. Thank you for the opportunity to share. I'm here with my RIDE colleague, Samantha Brins, and we're also joined by our colleagues at the Center for Leadership and Educational Equity, Michelle Lee and Edna Atiash. And we're right from the get-go, we embraced your meeting ID followed by. I wasn't sure what that was. I just heard some background. Sorry about that. So From the very beginning, we saw applying for the School Climate Transformation Grant as an opportunity to think about our state role in multi-tiered systems of support. And for us, that's been an evolution of state level work in PBIS and RTI. And we actually have a really great infograph that shows the evolution of that type of evidence-based support work. And we do have a state level partners in our systems of support, and they have a whole professional development suite called Bridge RI. So they're a partner. And when we were writing the grant, we had engaged in some work with the Center for Leadership and Educational Equity around their continuous improvement processes. And when we were writing the grant, we thought that the approach that CLE, so that's their that's what we call them, the center, and we thought that that would be a really great model to engage not only with schools, but also for the Department of Education. So as part of our state level activities, we had proposed to work with 9 schools within districts, and those schools would identify an area of educational inequity that they wanted to work on, and a small focal group within their school that was experiencing some kind of disparity in either academic goals or behavioral goals, and work with us through this project. And then in a similar way, we have a RIDE team that is looking at how we do cross collaboration within our department, utilizing a continuous improvement process. And I think, for everyone on the call, the continuous improvement process isn't linear, but it really has meant a lot to the schools that are participating in the School Climate Transformation Network with us, that RIDE, the State Department of Education, is undergoing its own kind of similar process in hearing about, successes, and I think even more importantly, the challenges and how we're trying to work through those has been very positive. So I'll turn it over to Samantha to share additional detail that she'd like to, from her perspective.
Thank you, Rosemary. I think you did a fantastic job in sort of laying down how we thought through the project and how we included our partners. And I would just add to that we were really thinking about a macro, a meso, and a micro sort of approach in the work. What we were doing at the state level, the work that was happening in the schools and at the district level, and how that was informing us. And then also like some cross-sector coordination. And one of the brilliant pieces of the Rhode Island School Climate Project really was, it was in coordination with other federal efforts that had as a foundation a multi-tiered system of support. So for example, we have 2 cohorts of Project Aware from SAMHSA, and also the USDOE school-based mental health grant. And the work that's happening on the internal level with our partners in School Climate Network, including the Center for Leadership and Educational Equity and our own internal systems of support, that Bridge RI learning platform, how we're all working together. And that work has leveraged a state level MTSS team that is really beginning to develop guidance and practice profile for the field. And I think that this work happening in real time, being informed by the work of the schools, the lessons learned within the network, and the power of that network, especially during this challenging time when we've really had to pivot and support the teams in very different ways, differentiating our supports for them. So it's really kind of coming together at the state level and at the network level. And I think that that's the combination that's really kind of informing how we're going to vision our future. Because we're doing the same work at RIDE that the schools are doing, we're really creating that common language, that common understanding. And then what are the necessary foundational, essential elements that we need to focus on? What are the levers that are driving the work and will lead to some sustainability for this work moving forward? I'd also open it up if any of our partners here, Michelle Lee, I know was here from CLE, and also Edna Attias, if they wanted to jump in. They run the direct network work of coaching and TA, which is really our practice. We go in with all of the teams. We have site-based team level meetings, and then also a vibrant and robust network.
My name is Amanda Sellers, and I'm from Oklahoma. And I just want to kind of piggyback off of what, and I know my name, it says Heather Graham. That's my other colleague. We co-direct together. And so with the school climate grant, we've done a lot of what Rhode Island was talking about, really focusing on how to braid that funding out of our student support division to make a kind of comprehensive approach. So really looking at that integrated mental health, that common language, common understanding of what multi-tiered systems of support looks like in each district. And we've really taken it from cohort 1 being that site level implementation to cohort 2 being that district level implementation. But one of the things we really recognize, especially from our state level, when we looked at our data, is we have a high prevalence of students in our classroom with ACE scores, we come from a very high prevalence of trauma. So we quickly realized that we couldn't do this work just in isolation in terms of just implementing those positive behaviors or social emotional learning, but really taking that trauma-informed approach and really helping schools develop what those principles look like within the practices of positive behavior supports and within that social emotional learning, and doing that in conjunction with getting more mental health supports. Mental health supports in the schools being how do we use some of these ESSER fundings, these grant fundings out there to get some licensed mental health professionals from the community. So really working with some of those community-based professionals through our AWARE grant, and also we received a crisis response grant through DOJ grant. So really setting up a statewide response team to respond to some of these crises that are going on. And also what we found, and I know that we're not the only ones, is that we really had to kind of pause and attend to the self-care and wellness of our educators, of our mental health professionals in the school. So we really focused this year on not only making sure that we were building up our internal coaches at that district and site level, but that we were also attending to their wellness, really kind of being able to help them identify what does compassion fatigue look like? What does vicarious trauma look like? What is it where when we are talking about our window of stress tolerance, where are we at and where are our students coming to the building at? So I just, it's very empowering to hear what other states are doing, because we too are doing some of these same things. And I think the gentleman from Hawaii, was it Gordon, who really said, hey, making sure that executive leadership, making sure that our legislators are aware of the work that's going on. Last year, we were able to pass a law that our pre-service educators have to come into practice with MTSS knowledge. So they have to receive that in their pre-service learning. So we really are kind of, again, it's that systemic approach of hitting it from every angle. And it's good to be a part of a network that is doing that across the United States, nationally and internationally. So thank you for the support you provide.
Hi, my name is Edna Atias. I'm from Rhode Island, so from the Center for Leadership and Educational Equity. And I just wanted to add to what Rosemary and Samantha said about, in addition to our improvement science methodology, building shared understanding, and providing targeted support for our partners, we also, another one of our angles is to really build the foundational leadership skills that our schools need in order to reorganize their systems and to create the structure and the processes for MTSS implementation. And we really work with our teams to help them form a sense of agency. So it's coming from the ground roots up. So we're defining who a leader is. So, and the teams are really driving the work as opposed to just the administration or for it to be coming from higher up.
Thanks, Edna. I see that there's a question from Samantha in Rhode Island to Amanda in Oklahoma, and wanted to know if you could share the pivot in your cohorts from site-based work to the district level cohort.
Yes, no, great question. So what we realized is, because this was our first year as a state to receive the grant in 2018, is that if we were going to build up that sustainability and capacity, we know that administration at the site level and the turnover rate that we were seeing with leadership at site level, we couldn't sustain the work at that site base. There was the district is really where we realized, hey, if we can get to some of that district level leadership, district level teams, that they could build the practices and have sustainability. And plus at that district level, what we were seeing is they have more data and knowledge in terms of what's the mental health of our communities, not just the mental health, but what are the needs of our communities? What are our, as a whole school community, what is being said? So we just shifted. I think Heather had put up the slide earlier of kind of what that district team looks like. And we worked with Dr. Guffey from our regional office in Missouri, and she providing that TA assistance. And we really just kind of took those site-based, the ones that were interested, and said, hey, we want to go district level. And we just switched or made that pivot to say, okay, they've embedded this work. Now we're going to take it to those district teams. And now what we're finding is, especially everything that's happened over the last 2 years, is that districts are saying, help us as a whole, as a district. So not just focusing on a site. We recognize that as a full school community, we need to approach things. I'm not sure if I answered that correctly, or if that's the answer you were looking for. If not, I'll be happy to flesh it out a little more.
All right, thanks everyone for sharing. So looking at who we've got on the call, Georgia, do you guys want to jump in? Because I know you guys are a unique group in that you are based at the Georgia Department of Ed, have PBIS, have a statewide aware project. I think you're on your second one, plus a school climate transformation, and trying to juggle everything, plus everything else that it is required at an SEA. I know it's been challenging.
Thanks, Heather. Are you able to hear me now? I think I got unmuted. So yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate the invitation. Like Heather said, my name is Jason Byers, and I serve as the program manager at the Georgia Department of Education. And kind of like Heather, we've got probably 1,400, over close to 1,500 schools in Georgia out of the little over 2,000 schools that we have that are implementing PBIS. And so what we wanted to do was use this grant to really expand our reach. We wanted to go a little broader, but also a lot deeper. So it's allowed us to get our tier 2, tier 3 trainings off the ground. We are at the Department of Education, and it's interesting. So we're the school climate team, and under school climate is PBIS. It is our school climate transformation grant, and it is our Project Aware grant. And so I get to manage all three of those, which is unique because now we're able to align the work. And so if you come to one of our trainings or get one of our resources, you just know it came from the Georgia Department of Education. And, behind the scenes, we handle all the evaluation and the documentation and the budgeting side. But for the consumers, the resources are coming from the Georgia Department of Education. So whether it's coming from PBIS or the grant, one of the grants, they just know that the focus is on the work. We also partner, and Heather and I have talked about this, with our MTSS division. We have a state MTSS grant as well, the SCTG grant, and we partner with them closely. We provide an annual conference every summer. That's a joint conference, and it's just all about how do we support students. And through Heather's help, so Heather is our national TA person, and so through her help, we've really aligned all this work through the SSFI. And Heather walked us through that last year, and we've continued to take our SSFI formed, and everything that we do is aligned through that, and that really helps keep us grounded. It helps keep the work focused. So we're really grateful for that. The other thing that's unique is that someone mentioned braided funding a few minutes ago. We braid our funding through federal funds, state funds. We have state partnerships with our Department of Early Care and Learning. And then we have one additional grant in addition to School Climate and Project Aware. We have a local grant. So we have about 6 funding sources. And I think that's important. Someone was talking about sustainability and focusing on sustainability. And I think that's really important to focus on that. We've really used our resources to hire a resource development specialist. We know that the teachers need resources right now. And so our focus really has been on getting those resources to teachers. We do that through monthly PL that I call Coffee and Conversation. Heather helps me set up national speakers that come in and do that PL for us. We're really focusing with Jessica Daly out at the University of Oregon on the TIPS problem-solving process, because we know that applies no matter what you're doing, whether it's attendance or behavior or academics. If we can apply that problem-solving process, we're really working with our districts there, and we have identified our high needs districts as the ones that we're starting with in our first cohorts, and so the grant's allowing us to do that. And then we're working with Susan Barrett on the interconnected systems framework and making sure that we're layering in those mental health supports. Heather, some of the other, we got a huge partnership with Georgia Public Broadcasting. And so we develop resources, videos, digital lesson plans, one-pagers through them that are then housed on our Georgia Public Broadcasting website. And so anybody that's on the call, you can go there and take a look at some of those resources. We're partnering with our Curriculum and Instruction Department right now. We've just produced a 3-part podcast series. If you're on the PBIS State Leaders Network on Facebook, I posted those there for you. So feel free to listen. We did an elementary, a middle, and a high school, how to improve climate in those areas. And then our digital, our videos are all Georgia educators talking about how they improve climate in their classroom. And what we want to do is we want to develop a digital lesson plan, a video to demonstrate it, and then those one-pagers to provide the research. And so we've got 18 digital lesson plans on the website, 6 videos. And we're working on now getting the one-pager. So that's kind of a little overview, Heather, of kind of how we're trying to braid everything and then make things sustainable. And also the most important thing is get the resources to the teachers, because they absolutely need them. On our website, on the Georgia Public Broadcasting website, the digital learning plans that we put up are the #1 download on Georgia Public Broadcasting right now. So that lets us know we had it over 5,000 times, 5,000 downloads per semester. So teachers are really looking for those resources to help them out. So I'm happy to answer any questions. But Heather, thanks for the opportunity to get to share with the team today.
Thanks, Jason. And I really want to encourage you guys to, if you have questions specific for Jason, and I know Amy, I think, is on this as well from Georgia, please put them in the chat box because I think this is a great opportunity. If you also want to know how to connect with him, his contact is definitely on the national site because he's identified as the PBIS state coordinator, or you can always contact me and I can connect you guys. But I think, Jason, you brought up a good point in that we all want to get grants. We all want to get money to be able to do and have impact across the state. And then sometimes it comes in, you're like, oh my gosh, like I really need to do this. Or there's such great opportunities and it's like, how am I going to do all of this? There are so many, there's a lot of money, and how do I find the personnel to get this done? And that's where it requires really clever planning to be able to figure out and align and overlap what's happening with other projects. Because sometimes it's a matter of, when we're looking at our rural sites, there just aren't personnel there. So how do we get creative in that process? So I think we're all going to be learning from each other. And Georgia, if you definitely get it down on how to braid and align effectively, trust me, we will all be learning from you. So I don't know if anyone who's on from Wisconsin wants to share what they're doing. If anybody else has challenges and has questions or something that they're concerned about, because I guarantee if it's happening in your state, chances are it's happened in at least one other state too. And I think that's a great point too. And as a reminder for you guys, if you are having difficulties working on addressing some of your goals, or it does feel like it's too much, again, they always have to be careful at OSSS because it is an approved grant with approved goals. And but there sometimes we can realize that some may somewhat be saying a lot of the same thing, and we may be able to combine the data for that. But I think that's a great recommendation. Any news on if there's going to be another opportunity for school climate transformation grant for SEAs? I have not heard anything. And from what I understand in looking at the grants forecast and in the meetings, there have been no news to report on that either. We are keeping our fingers crossed. But I do know that there's lots of opportunities for around the areas addressing violence prevention, which does align so much with what we've been doing around school climate. So keep your eye out for that. Project Prevent is one of them. I know SAMHSA is getting ready to put out a bunch of stuff I've heard. There's going to be an awful lot around mental health in particular. So if you have been addressing some of that within your school climate transformation grant, that might be a perfect additional funding source to be able to tap into. But school climate in and of itself, we have not heard. Well, I do not have any other particular things to cover for you guys. This is the opportunity. If there are any additional questions, you could either raise your hand or put it in the chat box. But I really want to give a huge shout out to all of you guys that shared today. I mean, we've had Georgia, Rhode Island, Florida, Hawaii, Oklahoma, all share. And I appreciate all of you for doing that. kudos to Rhode Island, who I think have 4 people here. So at least 25% of the state was on the call, right? But thank you guys for being here, and thanks for all of the work that you all are doing. And please don't forget too, you have questions, whether you're connected through the National Center on PBIS, whether you're connected with, if there is an existing PBIS state project in your state, just know that we're here to assist you regardless of that. And like I said, if some of you may be working, in isolation of what's happening within the state, we're also still here to help you, because we are here to provide technical assistance around that multi-tiered behavioral framework. But our goal too is that you're not only meeting the goals that you have set up, but you're actually seeing the impact of why the grant was written and why you're doing what you're doing. And our hope would be that all the work that you guys are putting into this, that it would sustain long after the life of the grant. So really that's the big piece. So if there's any way that we can even assist in helping to build those partnerships within your state, sometimes it's just requiring someone to come from a different state to say the same exact thing that you've been saying. Trust me, we all borrow on each other on that process. But our goal is to support you guys with that. So given that I don't see any more questions coming in, I will officially end this. I really want to thank you guys. Thank you so much for participating and sharing your stories. And I really, if you do want to connect and talk further with any of the folks that did share today, you can contact me off the National Center or flpbis.org, and I'm happy to help connect you. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your week, and keep on doing the great work. Thanks. Bye.